Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail, and my guest today has been on, comes on about once a year, and her name is Gay Hilton, Dr. Gay Hilton. She's a naturopathic doctor, and we're going to gross you out a little bit today by talking about parasites. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Now, I'd like you to tell our viewing audience how you got educated on the subject of parasites.
Well, in my practice, I test what we call acupoint alarms, and those acupoint alarms will go specific for liver, kidney, whatever the organ or gland happens to be, weak. When you're testing the acupoint alarm, and you have them lay down on a table and bring their arm up 90 degrees, and then you muscle test while they place their fingers on the specific acupoint alarm. But the issue typically is that you'll get a weak link somewhere. That means the chi flow isn't getting to the organ or gland that it should. So you test to see what's going to fix it. And then you test to see if there's an organ or gland formula that will rebuild the chi flow as well as the function. After I get done doing that, then I test for pathogens. Well, I kept finding tremendous numbers of people coming in with a wide variety of symptoms that were all dealing with parasites. And I can test for roundworm, tapeworm, flatworm, which is the liver fluke, or flukes, period, and the micro, which are the amoebic protozoans. And I typically send an intake form out via email, and in that intake there's a questionnaire that they're to assign a number to, depending on the degree of the symptom. And after you get to 24, 25 in total points, that is indicative that you probably are dealing with a parasite infection because it's a parasite questionnaire. And when the numbers are high, I always record at the top of the intake form when they bring it in, their PQ, parasite questionnaire, number. And like I said, anything above 24, 25 is very pointed towards a parasite infection. And then as I test, I'm using these vials that are antiparasitic for roundworm, tapeworm, flatworm, and microorganisms. And then I can actually see which formula they're going to need to correct and get rid of the parasite infection. By the way, 70 to 75% of the populace is dealing with an underlying parasite.
And they don't know it.
And they don't know it. And
do they all have symptoms then?
they have a medley of symptoms. Everything from arthritis to gastrointestinal distress to sinus problems to lung problems to eye problems. Depends on where your weak link is and where the parasites have settled. But we all have parasites and they live in symbiosis with us. So it's not unusual to find parasites in the body. In fact, they actually have a job they do. For example, if you have an injury, it's the parasites that go in and clean out the debris. But when they overrun your system, that's when they become an issue. And that's when you need to go on a cleanse. So if you have animals in your house, that's a first indicator that you should probably be doing a parasite cleanse at least twice a year.
Okay. Or
at least getting checked.
Is there something that people could just get over the counter?
Yes.
That they could take for that?
Well, yes. Typically what I recommend is garlic. Do a lot of garlic in your diet. People that like to eat Indian food, the reason why the Indian food is so spicy and hot is because in India they have an awful lot of parasitic infections.
So they're fighting it all the time.
Same thing in China. And in China, it's just routine to do parasite cleanses. And because it's the raw fish. They eat a lot of raw fish in China and in, in the other Asian countries.
Oh, yeah, the sushi.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where they're getting a lot of it.
Yeah, I've had people tell me they'd rather eat the raw sushi than to avoid it. You know, people that like the
Taste.
sushis with the raw fish. I don't know how they can stand it myself. Okay, I guess the picture didn't. We're not supposed to use that picture.
Okay, well, I happen to bring
Yeah.
with me a liver fluke.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to turn the bottle, and there we go. Perfect. See that floating at the bottom? That's a liver fluke.
Yeah, it's not alive.
It's dead. It's in alcohol. One of my patients, actually from Pittsburgh, came up, and I tested her. And her mother was with her, and she was only about 16, 17 years of age at the time. And the mother never said a word other than told me the symptoms, and she did the parasite questionnaire, and the
How
numbers
old
were
was the patient?
16, 17.
16 or 17, okay.
And the mother didn't say anything more about the symptoms other than that she was having this and that issue. But her parasite numbers were high. So I told the mother right off the bat, I said, I'm a little suspicious that we're going to find a parasite infection, only because we're seeing these high numbers. I said, doesn't mean that's what it is, because sometimes fungal infections will be very similar in symptoms. And all times, more than not, we will see an underlying fungal infection beneath the issue with the parasites. So, you know, you have to just look at the whole picture and see what shows up when you test the acupoint alarms. Sure enough, when I got testing, I found worms. In fact, I found flatworms. So I had to put her on the flatworm formula. And the mother kind of looked at me and she said, I'm going to go out in my car and get something. When she came back, she brought that bottle. And in the bottle was the flatworm. And they're kind of like a leaf-shaped worm.
Yeah, yeah.
And she said that had come out of the daughter.
But she had more in her still.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, probably crowded with them, only because, you know, we were seeing that the issues of the worms can vary depending on the type of worm. Some inhabit the colon, some spread through the blood, some get in specific organs and glands, some lodge in the sinuses,
Ew.
some get in the eyes. I have gone out to Ogden, Utah, to do seminars out there to practitioners of holistic health and also some medical people. And typically what we see is this issue of people having symptoms and not associating it with parasites. And I have had patients literally that have been to Cleveland Clinic and back with no response to the diagnosis of parasites because they just don't look for them. Unfortunately, allopathy, it kind of ignores the parasite issue, and I certainly hope we are having some medical professionals listening to this, because it's about 70 to 75% of the time you will find parasite issues with skin problems, with psychoses, emotional issues. The parasites exude a neurotoxin into the blood, and that neurotoxin affects brain. And it can be, I have seen it with muscular dystrophy patients, MS patients, that especially with the microparasites, where they can affect brain function. And when you start seeing all the variations of parasitic infections and their effects, it's really something that should be being analyzed medically. Unfortunately, even with dogs, the smear, they have to do a colon smear.
Oh, yeah.
To really be able to, you know, get an idea of, is that individual suffering from a parasite infection. Sometimes the blood test will miss it. So the colon smear is a great way to get it.
They don't always show up in the
Exactly. In fact,
colon
many times,
smears.
yeah, because the lumen of the colon is where they crawl in and hide.
So they don't come out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I've even had cases, this really gets you. I had a case of a guy that came to see me. He said that he was dying. He said, I've been everywhere. He said, I've been to gastroenterologists. Nobody has been able to help me. And he said, I'm hoping you can, because he said, I'm soon to go. He was that sick. He could not eat. He had to drink his food. He was vomiting. He was having diarrhea, constipation, not diarrhea. And he was having to take enemas every day just to move his bowels.
Oh, gosh.
Now, I have had just the opposite. I've had patients that have had severe diarrhea, vomiting, and also we're all over the place and nobody could find anything. Energetic testing, boom, we found the parasite. We get them on the parasite cleanse. In his case, I got him because he was so infected with parasites in more than one species.
Oh.
I gave him something to kind of clean the colon out first, and then we proceeded with the parasite cleanse. Because you can actually, and I tell people this, don't ever buy over-the-counter parasite cleanses because they're too tumultuous. They're going to be like a volcano that erupts, and instead of slowly getting rid of the parasite infection, it can be a long, arduous, horrible experience where they get very sick because all that waste is coming out and the body can't release it fast enough, and then it retoxes. And we don't want retox. We want to get rid of the parasite and the parasite waste in particular, because not only is the parasite toxic and not healthy for the body to handle, but it exudes a neurotoxin. That can affect brain function. That can affect neurological function. So there's where the neurological issues can occur. So in both this man's case, he expelled literally a bag, like a membrane bag loaded with parasites.
Ew.
That were very odorous.
Oh, gosh.
And he said, I just can't even believe what I'm going to tell you. And he said, not one membrane bag, but several. And he said, after that, he got better. And of course, I had already at that point put him on a parasite cleanse.
And he'd been to a lot of doctors who hadn't
find
been
it.
able to figure out what
Nope.
was wrong with him.
Including gastroenterologists. Now that's what's even scarier.
You would think that they would at least
Yeah.
look into it.
Well,
yeah.
they scoped him and then nobody could see anything. So this could have been way up high.
Yeah. Now, this fluke, like this liver fluke that you have sitting on the table with us here.
And we will not name it.
Yeah, we will not name it. It's not alive. But now you said once that these flukes can cause a wide variety of different kinds of cancers in lots of different parts of the body. then.
Yes. Now, there was some research done by a naturopath, Hulda Clark, who actually discovered that there was a certain species of liver fluke. Phaseos buski, I believe, is the name. And they found that in 500 different cancer cases, when they killed that particular liver fluke, cancer went away. So the reason why we can't say that worms cause cancer, parasites cause cancer, but they certainly run the system down. When you run the immune system down, and they're also eating your nutrition, and they're making you crave sweets and things that you shouldn't be eating.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you're literally feeding them. They're hosting off you. Then they grow bigger and they thrive. On the other hand, your nutrition goes down because they're eating your nutrients.
Yeah, it sounds like it can be an awfully hard situation to get under control.
And the worst part about it is as you are eating and craving sweets and all the wrong foods, That sometimes can be fungal also. But parasites love sugar. They love white, fluffy, puffy. So anything that you have that's white, fluffy, puffy is absolutely
feeding
feeding parasites, feeding fungus. And like I said, many times you'll see a combination of both.
Oh.
You'll have fungus underneath the parasite infection, and you got to do layer by layer. Peel and heal. Clean one layer off. Herring's law of cure, as we naturopaths call it. You get rid of one layer, and beneath that layer is another layer that needs to be addressed. So you got rid of, if the parasites are on top, you got to clean the parasites out of the body.
And then do people seem to just stop craving
Yes.
the sweets and
Yes.
things once the parasites are gone? It
Yes.
gets the cravings under control. You hear so much about food cravings these days, so that's probably one of the things that causes food cravings.
That, and there's a number of things that will set a parasite off. Stress, emotional stress.
Oh, really?
Emotional stress, we now know, is, according to Dr. Bruce Lipton, who is one of the stem cell researchers, is one of the beginnings of issues that set off all kinds of problems. When your emotions get depressed and you become sad and nothing makes you happy, your vital life force goes down.
Oh, yeah.
Think of the frequencies of the energy field of the meridian system. And as you begin to get depressed and down, so does your frequency, so does your vibratory rate, so does your happy quotient. So as a consequence of that, deaths, bankruptcy, divorce, any number of things can set someone off into a state of unhappiness and depression, and that in turn lowers the immune system.
Oh, yeah. And then sometimes people, when they are stressed out, they tend to eat a lot of what's known as comfort foods
Right.
at those times, too. And comfort foods tend to not be the healthiest foods, and so that probably feeds parasites and other organisms, too.
Absolutely.
Now, about this questionnaire that you were mentioning, you passed those out when you did a parasite talk for us at one of our Vegetarian Society dinners, to take home and fill out to see if we, what kind of a score we got if we thought we needed to be tested for parasites. Do you have a website that people can go to download copies of that for
No,
themselves?
I don't. I have a website, but I don't have that on.
That's not on it.
But if you go online and even just type in parasite questionnaire, there are all kinds of them out there.
Oh, so people can get them.
Absolutely. Now, Dr. Jack Tips, T-I-P-S, who is also a naturopathic doctor from out west, is the one that I think has had the best parasite questionnaire. So if you go to his, just type in Dr. Jack Tips parasite questionnaire. I'm sure you can bring it up, because that's the one I use.
Yeah, I remember one time I came to you for an appointment because I thought I had parasites, because I'd filled out your questionnaire
And you were high?
and I was not feeling well at the time, but it was right after my mother had passed away, and I remember you had me come over, but you did wind up telling me that I had just been under a lot of stress, and that was what caused my symptoms. It turned out I didn't have parasites, but I thought I might,
Exactly.
because I mean, the stress was causing symptoms that were similar to a lot of the ones on the questionnaire.
And speaking of the symptoms, I'm glad you brought that up. There are so many diversified symptoms that if someone said to me, is there any specifics? Well, yes and no. We know that the parasites exude neurotoxins. So any neurological issues need to be looked at with respect to, is there a parasite infection back of this? There's always an etiology. That's what we naturopaths are real good at, is we don't look at symptoms, we look at what's back of the symptom. So in many cases, the etiology can be that you've got a parasite that's exuding a neurotoxin into your body and causing seizures, especially in animals. When I see animals that have seizures, many times there'll be parasites back of that. But cravings of sweets, rashing on the skin, itching, that no matter what you take, nothing's getting improved.
It's not working, yeah.
Excuse me. So the idea being you've got to look at what is back of the rash, what's back of the symptom, and then from there determine that, okay, there's a issue going on here that needs to be addressed. Is it a bacterium? Is it a fungus? Is it a virus? Is it heavy metal? Is it parasites? Now here's another interesting facet. If you have heavy metal exposure, the heavy metals actually draw in fungus, bacteria, virus, parasites.
Really?
Yes, like a magnet.
Really? Oh
So
my gosh.
you can go back and you can say, well, we may have an issue here of parasites, but what's back of the parasites? What's drawing the parasites in? Is it diet? Is it emotions? Is it your environment? Exposure to heavy metals? Now, heavy metals obviously would be lead, cadmium, cigarette smoke, any type of exposure to heavy metals. Lead being a common one, and cadmium from cigarette smoke and car exhaust.
You mentioned the smoking and like that. I've been recently. We watched a DVD called "What the Health." I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah, I have.
Have you seen it?
No, but I've heard of it.
Really, really interesting. And they were putting the things like hot dogs and ham and processed meats in the same category as cigarette smoking and
Yes.
asbestos exposure because of the way the meats are prepared.
And I'm glad you brought that up because now they're using celery juice instead of nitrates in some of the bacons and some of the hams and all that type of thing.
Oh, celery juice?
Yeah, celery juice to get the taste that you look for in ham and hot dogs and that type of thing. But in all honesty, eat organically. Eat your diet predominantly raw, and we naturopaths recommend at least 75% raw.
Some even
80's better.
Some 80 to 85%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With only 15 to 20% slightly cooked, and then it should only be slightly cooked. Okay? Look at the Oriental diet. The Oriental diet is crunchy vegetables that are steamed or cooked over the wok very quickly. And the Mongolian, you get those Mongolian big heaters that they put the vegetables on, and they're put some oil and they're done in 2 to 3 minutes. But stay away from raw meats. This is where the sushi becomes a problem.
Yeah.
You get the raw salmon and the raw this and the raw that, and that's a lot of times where you're going to pick up your parasites. But this is also the reason why many people in Asia eat a lot of spicy foods. The Szechuan type of Chinese food is obviously very hot and spicy. Same with the Mexicans, a lot of parasites, and the foods are spicy for a reason, the chilies and everything else. In American food typically is not spicy, but the garlic, parasites hate. Diatomaceous earth, parasites hate.
Oh yeah, yeah. I had
food grade.
I had an experience with the cats that I adopted 2 years ago. Now, I'd been meaning to put diatomaceous earth on them for flea prevention and didn't get around to it all the first summer. And then in the fall, I noticed that one of the cats had tapeworm segments on its butt.
Yep.
So I said to myself, well, You know, because quite often veterinarians will tell you that a lot of the tapeworms that animals get are carried by fleas, actually.
Exactly.
And so I said, so I put some diatomaceous earth on the cats 1 week, and then the following week I put some more on them. And after the second application of the diatomaceous earth, I had never seen any fleas on the cats or anything, but after the second application of the diatomaceous earth that I had put on the cat's fur, I wasn't seeing any tapeworm segments anymore.
Awesome.
I mean, they were gone, you know.
And by the way, the segments for pets will look like little pieces of rice
Right.
in the bedding. But that isn't always the case.
But you see it on them too.
Yeah, you can see it.
yeah.
You can see it in their stool. It'll look like little, as you mentioned, white segments, as
Right.
opposed to roundworms that look like spaghetti. So I always compare linguine, tape,
Oh gosh.
spaghetti, round. And that's exactly the way they look, except that the segments will be small, but you'll see just the stool just covered with these little white flat pieces that look like linguine.
Right.
And then when they dry, they look like rice in the bedding. And you'll have animals with ear infections and low immune systems as a consequence of this. So I always tell people, if you have animals, make sure the diatomaceous earth is a great idea. But you should also pepper them with the diatomaceous earth, the DE, food grade, always, outside, not inside. Because you'll be breathing in the powder and you don't want to do that.
Right.
Because it can get into your lungs and it's not good to breathe. But that's a great way to get rid of fleas, which cause tapeworm. And not only that, but it's healthy for the animal. It is. And some people sprinkle it in their water, but you have to mix it. You know, if it's in the water, and you have to periodically just keep mixing it because it'll lay on the bottom.
So I figured that was what happened, was when the cat groomed herself, she ingested some of it and it killed the tapeworm. So
And you should also wash your hands, rule of thumb.
after petting your
After
animals.
petting or having your animals close to you, wash your hands before you put your hands near your mouth.
Right. Now, are those people living in this area, are those the main parasites we have to worry about around here?
Yes and no. All parasites. You can be any species. Typically, I see more roundworm than I even see tape.
Oh, okay.
But usually tape and roundworm is what you see with animals, more than you do the micro. And that's because of their processed food diet also. And I'm one that doesn't believe that a processed food diet for dogs is any better than it is for humans. So when you see this kibble, you know, it's all processed. So I try to feed my dog, and I have long livers. They go 15, 16, 17 years. I feed them human food. And I give them the good stuff that dogs and cats would eat, of course. But I feed them, you know, the yams and the pumpkin and carrots. And the carrots should be cooked. And quinoa, you want to keep them away from wheat. Quinoa, and all these types of foods, and lots of garlic and vegetables, slightly cooked vegetables. So my dog eats what I do.
Oh, okay. So when you cook for yourself, you're cooking for your dog too.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so if people think that they have parasites, should definitely make an appointment to be checked for
Yes.
them.
No matter who the unfortunate thing is, and this is a fact. Even Harvard Medical School students don't pay heed to parasites, because I have a good friend that's son graduated with his internship and his fellowship from Harvard Medical School, and he laughed at the idea.
Oh,
of
did
parasites.
he really?
And
So-
he's now just about to be a dermatologist, and I said, you must pay attention to this. This is a lot of what's back of skin issues. But again, if they, and this is typically what I read, if they started treating parasites for many issues that patients would commit, they would wipe out so many health conditions, there would be no need to take drugs.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it? So you definitely think that probably if you suspect such a thing, it wouldn't be a bad idea to seek out a naturopathic doctor.
Yeah, rather than try to treat yourself. And the reason for that, again, is what I mentioned earlier. When you are taking those over-the-counter parasite cleanses, they don't have the proper drainage.
Oh, okay.
And you start killing off too much too quick, and now you're sicker. And many people get sick on those.
Okay.
A, because they're not drinking enough fluids, and the rule of thumb is half your body weight in ounces, just to hydrate, fluid-wise every day. So if you have a parasite infection, you're killing off the parasite as well as the toxin they exude. You can get very sick. And typically, your liver will start crampy. You'll get crampy, and I always describe it as very similar to morning sickness.
Oh, okay.
A woman that has had morning sickness knows what that feels like. And it's kind of high up below the sternum in the liver, left lobe of the liver, that they get what we call a histamine reaction. They'll feel nauseous. They'll feel kind of weak. Joints hurt. Skin itches. No, any place there's an orifice, anus, nose, mouth.
Oh, speaking of nose, I remember when I was like in 7th and 8th grade, there was the science teacher for the junior high at school, and I remember we did spend a certain amount of time teaching us about parasitic worms, and I remember he'd be saying something about, don't be surprised if you wake up in the middle of the night sometime and a worm comes out of your nose. I used to have trouble sleeping thinking about that because he actually succeeded at scaring me.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
It was like...
Now, the reason he said that, and I'm so glad you brought that up, typically, if your sleep is interrupted at night, and you're itching or you're restless, that is the time parasites are most active. They're nocturnal creatures. So it's very wise to at least find out if that is the issue. A medical professional would not be the best person to see. There's where the naturopathic doctor or the good naturopath that's certified.
Probably herbalists know about it, too.
Yes, absolutely, herbalists. And homeopaths also. And I do both. I do homeopathy and naturopathy. But I think that the most important thing to remember is symptoms at night, skin issues, lung issues, sinus issues. They love warm places. Kidney, bladder issues. Colon, any place that's warm and moist is where they like to be. So any place there's mucous membranes, if you have a parasitic infection, that's usually where you need to hone in at.
Yeah. A few years back, I saw some episodes of a television program called Monsters Inside Me.
Oh, yes.
Some of those stories were pretty hideous. There was one, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. There were a couple of different ones about little children who'd picked up parasites while they were playing outside. And one little boy actually suffered permanent brain damage. And I'm not sure if it was him or a different instance, but there was a little boy that died too from the parasites.
I'll tell you the story. I used one of the videos when I did a presentation out in Utah of that exact story. And this was a little boy, probably 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there, who was in Florida. And many of the areas in Florida have little ponds or small water areas behind homes. And this kid was out with his friends, and they were on those water boards. And he flipped, and he went in the water and got some water up in his nostrils. That night, he began to show signs of encephalitis. They thought it was encephalitis, brain issues, high fever. They took him into the hospital, ran tests, and that's what they were thinking was encephalitis. But he didn't test strong for it. At no time did they say, oh, this is probably parasites. They didn't even look at that. And so what ended up happening was he got worse and worse and worse. They finally remembered he had been in the water behind the house. They took a sample of the water, and here was some kind of a micro parasitic organism that had gotten into his nostrils, infected his brain, and you're right, he died.
Oh, yeah. Maybe that was the same exact person.
I'm sure.
Now there's I know of a person who had gone to a tropical part of the world and came back, and after returning home became very ill and was tested for all kinds of things. Couldn't find anything wrong with the person. The person was never properly diagnosed until they could see the parasites crawling in the person's skin, literally. And between probably the parasites did a lot of damage to begin with. Between that and the toxicity of the drugs the medical profession used, the person became mentally ill.
And more sick.
And what I'm wondering is, at this point in time, could this person still get help?
Yes, as long as the medical professional is smart enough to realize this could be a parasitic infection. And
I mean, this is after being treated after they finally figured it out. But I mean, is there some sort of thing that can be done to help the person get over the mental illness caused?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
There are things that can be done.
You've got to determine where that parasite has moved to. And they move around, too. They can go from the sinuses into the lungs, into this, into there. But the thing that the medical profession needs to look at is their assumption is that parasites only come from people who have been to third world countries. Anything could be less the truth than that.
Or eaten raw meat.
Exactly. These parasites are insidious, and we get them primarily from our animals. That's where we predominantly get them.
Right.
But we also get them from eating meat that's not cooked thoroughly. We get them from our fruit and vegetables that are not soaked.
Oh, yeah, you told us one time.
Especially south of the border.
You told us one time about food that's grown in Mexico.
Yes.
Fruits and vegetables that come from Mexico.
Or south of the border.
So anyways, I thought what kind of parasites do people get when they go to tropical?
Well, they could be bad ones. And, they can be in water. They could, like that boy aspirated up his nostrils. So it can be any atmosphere, any environment. The problem with south of the border is they use human excrement to fertilize a lot of their fields, and they contain worms.
Right.
But anybody that goes to any foreign country should be not so much Europe though, it's more Asia and Africa. And some of the insects carry parasites.
You're right.
The microorganisms.
Right. Well, about the on this one episode of Monsters Inside Me, there was something about raccoons carry a really nasty parasite. I mean, we're living in an area where there are raccoons, and carry a really nasty parasite. So I'm just throwing this out here for a warning. Make sure not to leave food sitting out where wild animals can get into it that be attracted to your yard or anything.
Exactly. But again, the symptoms are so variable. Someone can have issues even with their heart, arrhythmias, because parasites exude a neurotoxin. If that neurotoxin affects the rhythm of your heart, again, MD, MS, any neurological condition, any emotional condition. I have had patients who were psychotic, who were suicidal.
Oh my gosh.
And who were aggressive and everything else. And we found parasites, and especially suicidal. That is my next door neighbor committed suicide. I am convinced she had an infection because she was over in she'd been in the Peace Corps and in a very bad area where the conditions were unhealthy, and she came back with a mystery illness. There you go. I don't know that for a fact, but my guess would be. What I have seen in my practice is a tremendous number of people that have had suicidal tendencies that have parasite infections. Again, the neurotoxin from the parasite is exuded into the body, and it can cause all kinds of mental issues, emotion, depression, psychosis, suicidal tendencies. So that is something I can honestly say I've seen a predominance of. I had a girl I remember call me on the phone, and she said, I had to pull my car over to the side. She was on a parasite cleanse that I had put her on, and I had warned her, make sure you're drinking plenty of fluids because you got to flush these devils out. And so that again that's a real issue that needs to be addressed. If you're on a parasite cleanse, you should go to a naturopath to get it, because they'll have the best type of cleanse with the best drainage so that you're not getting a buildup of the toxins from the parasites in the body. And also make sure you're drinking plenty of fluids. And I always tell them to journal their symptoms, especially suicidal people.
Oh, yeah.
But I will guarantee you, I've seen the suicidal issues and the emotional, the psychoses and the neuroses so back of parasitic infections.
And they actually get over these mental symptoms.
Yes. And other symptoms. You're not dealing just with the emotional. Skin issues, especially on the chest and on the arms, rectal itching, ear itching, again, any orifice. Chronic problems that just never go away. Cravings that never go away. And you'll get people come in your office and they'll say, I've had this stuff for 20 or 30 years and it's gone. And it's just been, you got to work though, slow but sure, layer by layer, to let the body clear in the priority the body chooses, because the body's not going to go after a parasite infection until the organs of elimination are clean. So if I'm testing someone and I see the numbers are high, but their lymph is congested, or their colon's congested, or their liver or kidneys are congested, they're not a subject for starting a parasite cleanse.
Yeah, I do know that I've heard that quite often people who lose their temper really easily have
Yes.
a congested liver.
Yes, that's a good point. Anger is in the Chinese system is associated with the kidneys, anxiety, and anger with the liver, And so those are organs of elimination. And so some people that are just, and because of that neurotoxin being exuded, your ADHD kids or your ADD kids or adults oftentimes have a parasite infection back of it. But bottom line, suicides.
Really?
Oh, I have, yes. I see that all the time.
Do you think maybe it's because they've been sick with the parasite so long they can't take it anymore?
Well, they can't sleep. They're aggravated. They're not feeling well. Muscles, joints, ligaments, tendons hurt because that's associated with liver function. That's one of the things, when you have those kind of issues, you have to look at the liver because the liver's in charge of those systems. So if you're toxic with parasite waste, it's going to be in the liver, and you're going to have problems with joints and muscles and ligaments and tendons. You have to look at the organ or gland that the association of the parasites with, and you can test to see, okay, parasite infection, what organ or gland is, when I test, I can see which organ or gland's being addressed and hit hard by the parasites. And then we go in and clear for example, say your lymphatics are congested. I'll maybe put you on spleen or thymus along with the parasite formula that you'll take with that to hone in and target that particular system.
So probably people should be on a really good diet all the time anyways, because doesn't that help with cleansing a lot of the parasites?
Absolutely.
Out?
And the water. And
the
making
water.
sure that your fruit and vegetables are soaked before you eat them. And I generally recommend, believe it or not, 1 teaspoon, if you have like a 2-gallon sink, 1 teaspoon of Clorox and soak your fruit and vegetables in that, or a cup of white vinegar. Or
a cup of white vinegar.
Or the other thing is the vinegars are very good for cleansing. And some of those fruit washes are pretty good too. So then soak for 20 minutes.
So you can get a lot of the parasites.
They'll not survive.
Not survive.
And you're not ingesting them.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And meat cooked. We mentioned the sushi's are not a good idea unless you're pretty healthy and your body's been used to eating it. You know, like people in Asia can do that because their diet is so different than ours. They don't eat. Think of Asian food. When do you get desserts? It's, to a real Asian restaurant, they're not big on desserts.
No.
Or breads or anything like that. That's starch, processed food. That's what feeds them.
Right.
So we have to eat foods that are more in nature, raw, unprocessed, non-sweet, and make sure that if you are eating sweets, you're not eating an overload. It's okay to have a little bit of sweet. Maple syrup, or just coconut sugar is very good, as long as it isn't overdone.
Oh, yeah. Now, getting back to Monsters Inside Me kind of episodes, I remember there was an episode where I don't remember what the symptoms were that the man was having, but he'd been sick for a long time. And it wasn't until one day when he was looking in the mirror after he got up in the morning that he thought he saw a worm in one of his eyes.
I remember seeing that one too, yes.
Yes. He called his wife to come into the bedroom and look in his eye, and he had her look, and she said, "It does look like a worm in your eye," and that was how he finally got his situation under control. He'd been tested for all kinds of stuff, and it was finally when he just saw the worm in the mirror that they finally figured out what was wrong with him.
And those are usually the micro.
The micro?
Yeah, and I remember that episode because I saw the same episode, and I think he went to the eye doctor, and they did some kind of they looked under a microscope, or they took some kind of a sample of the fluid in the eye, and they could see the parasites in there. But I do recall that.
Oh yeah. Do you know what kind of a parasite it was?
I'm thinking it was micro, but I believe it was like the amoebic and a
some
protozoan.
it was more of a protozoan thing.
Yeah, but I remember also them actually, you could see it swimming in the fluids of the eye.
Oh gosh.
Under the microscope. So again, watch where you're putting your hands. If you're putting your hands up to your eyes and your hands you've been touching animals or touching reptiles or whatever it may be, you can be, passing something into your eye.
Yeah, I mean, people don't know that they can, there's all kinds of ways they can infect themselves now. I met a naturopathic dentist a couple of times, and I remember her telling that it's very important to soak your toothbrush in Listerine, in the old original formula Listerine every day. Because, I mean, you can not only, you can catch things, you can have just gotten over the flu or a bad cold or something and give it back to yourself.
Exactly. Now, I think now we don't want to get to the point where everything's got to be spotless, because you do need some germs. You can't be in an environment that's germ free, or you're not going to be healthy. You've got to have some germs to kind of get your body to balance. But there is, I think, a very keen awareness among naturopaths that parasites are back of most health issues. And it doesn't always, again, have to be the parasites. It could be the heavy metals. It could be any number of things that draw the parasites in, because if the system of the body begins to get depleted and depressed and vitality goes down, then you're going to host these kind of things.
Now there's an herbal thing called wormwood.
Yes.
I guess that got its name from being a remedy for certain types of parasites.
Cloves, wormwood, and artemisia, and all those things work together. But again, when I sell a parasite cleanse, I'm not putting together those herbs. They're put together by a team of herbalists that are crackerjack. They know what they're doing. They know what to put in for drainage. And these guys are the top in their field. I get my products from Innovita out of Utah and Systemic Formulas out of Utah. Actually, they're both in the same town. Oh, wow. Little town of Ogden, Utah. And both companies use bioenergy to form their formulas. So and these guys are just, like I said, they're the top of the shelf. They know what they're doing. They know how to. So I generally, even though there are parasite formulas out there, I am obviously going to say that mine are the best. I have no doubt, because I've been dealing with it for years. Not that you can't take wormwood and some of these other things, but then you have to be careful that you don't do too much too quick and get what we call a healing crisis.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Now, I once heard an herbalist say that after he'd given somebody something to take for a parasite cleanse, he got a he remembered getting a panicky phone call from somebody, because when they went to the toilet, the parasites were coming out, so the person freaked out at the sight of them, and he had to remind the person that's a good thing. It means you're getting rid of them.
Yes, and like you say, sometimes they don't have to come out the rectum. They can come out other orifices.
Like the nose.
Yeah, exactly, and that has happened. If they're in your sinuses and you're killing a parasite, that could possibly happen. But some of the agitation at night, especially if symptoms are worse at night, are a real clue that it could be a parasite infection you're dealing with, and that is something to be aware of. Cravings, like we mentioned, itchiness, anxiety. I mean, these are all things that need to be journaled. And when someone comes in and they do that parasite questionnaire, they'll go, wow, they're really high. My numbers are really high. I get people with 54s and 60s and 80s and 90s that are 4 or 5 times higher than the norm on a parasite questionnaire, which tells me right away this is probably what's going on. Doesn't always mean that's what it is, but it's a good idea. And if it is, the body will let you know. You'll test strong for the parasite formula.
Yeah, you know, we should probably do a really quick demonstration here with muscle testing. I could stand up and put my arm out, and you could show them how I'm strong.
Okay, do we have sugar here anywhere?
We've got the Fluke.
Well, we could do that, yes.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Why don't you come over here? Okay, just bring your arm straight
Which
out.
one? Oh, that
this
one?
arm, yes.
That one?
Okay, now, I want you to put your left hand, because you're right-handed, put your left hand up on top of your head.
Oh, on top of my
Yeah,
head.
and bring your right arm straight out, because you're you're right-handed. Don't let me push down. Now flip your palm on top of your head, sorry. On top of your head. Flip your palm on top of your head.
this
Yeah, right.
palm.
There we go, good.
Okay.
Good. All right, you're testable. Now, typically, though, what I do is I test you on a table so that I'm seeing that you're laying on the table, and I am testing you with your arm 90 degrees. But this is another way to test. Okay, now take that parasite,
Okay.
put it right on your liver, because this is a liver fluke. And
Okay.
hold it with your left hand.
Hold it with my left hand.
Bring your arm straight out. Don't let
Okay.
me push down. See, that's not a problem. Universally, if I give you a sugar packet,
I'll go weak.
you will go weak. If I give you something you need that's healthy, you will go strong.
And you won't be able to push
I
the
will not
arm.
be able. Now, but here's what we'll do instead,
Okay.
because we can do the
Okay.
mind-body connection here.
Okay.
All right, what I want you to do right now is I want you to think of the happiest moment of your life. And tell me when you get there. Just go into the image of the happiest moment in your life, bottom line.
Okay.
You there? Okay. Don't let me push. I'm going to push down on your arm. Oh, can you feel me pushing? Okay. Now, I want you to go to the saddest moment in your life. And I want you to get into that. I know it's a switch, but
Yeah.
go into that time period.
The time period that was the
The
saddest.
saddest.
Okay.
And I want you to go to the event.
Okay.
And tell me when you're ready.
I think so.
Okay? Don't let me push down on your arm. I'm going to use one finger so the
Okay.
public can see this.
Okay.
Have a seat. Now everybody goes, how does that happen?
Guess what? We're out of time.
Energetically speaking, that's why. We are energy. And when that energy is low, the environment, the thoughts, the emotions, vitality's low with it.
Well, we've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives. I hope you can come on again.
Of course.
And I will see the rest of you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, great.